A love for life with fiction. This video is about 150 well-acclaimed literary works from my personal collection, in chronological order of their original publications. From this collection, my list of the best 50 fictional works ever has been created and will be shared towards the end of this video. Homer may refer to either a genius poet or a tradition developed by multiple authors. Sophocles composed over 120 plays, but only 7 have survived in a complete form to this day. Some of the stories commonly known as parts of the Arabian Nights, such as Aladdin's Wonderful Lamp and the 7 Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor, were not part of this epic in its original Arabic versions. They were added to the collection by some European translators. About 20,000 pieces of music have been found linked to the works of Shakespeare. The novel's full name is The Ingenious Gentleman of Sir Quixote of La Mancha. The Irish novelist James Joyce considered its eponymous character as a symbolical prototype of the British colonist. About this satire prose, the English poet and dramatist John Gay once commented, "It is universally read, from the Cabinet Council to the nursery." The novel has been compared to Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, for they both recognize the importance of marriage for property inheritance. Some critics have considered the novel as a forerunner of the works done by modernist and postmodernist authors. A quote from the novel: "A lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony in a moment." Austen wrote, "I am going to take a heroine whom no one but myself will much like." The name Frankenstein has often been used to refer to the monster, though it is actually the name of the scientist who creates it. Poe is regarded by many the inventor of detective fiction. A quote from the novel Oliver Twist: "There were books, of which backs and covers are by far the best parts." This novel is regarded as a prototype model of the 19th century Russian literature. Due to the private consciousness and psychological intensity of this novel, Charlotte Bronte is considered as the literary ancestor of Marcel Proust and James Joyce. The title refers to a never-ending fair held in a town called Vanity along the pilgrim's route that represents human sinful attachment to worldly things. The English poet and painter Rossetti referred to the book as a fiend of a book, an incredible monster. The action is laid in hell, only it seems places and people have English names there. In the preface to the 1867 edition, Dickens wrote, "Like many fond parents, I have in my heart of hearts a favorite child, and his name is David Copperfield." A quote from the novel, "She had not known the weight until she felt the freedom." A quote from the novel, "For there is no folly of the beast of the earth which is not infinitely outdone by the madness of man." Vladimir Nabokov said that stylistically the novel was prose doing what poetry is supposed to do. It is regarded as the first complete modern novel in Russian literature. Gogol's Dead Souls, published earlier, was deemed incomplete by the author himself. The novel is a story of France and particularly elaborates on the various aspects of Paris. Appeared as a children's book on the surface, its underlying symbolism, logic, and mathematics can bemuse even a cultivated adult. A quote from the novel, "Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart." In addition to romance and family, the book is also a means of escape for women's lives subject to gender constraints. About the conception of the novel's theme, Flaubert wrote in 1864, "I want to write the moral history of the man of my generation, or more accurately, the history of their feelings. It's a book about love, about passion, but passion such as can exist nowadays, that is to say inactive." A quote from the novel, "If everyone fought for their own convictions, there would be no war." About the main theme of the novel, Dostoevsky wrote to Markov that it was the very one over which, consciously and unconsciously, I have been tormented all my life. It is the existence of God. The real name of George Eliot, who was regarded as one of the greatest English novelists of the Victorian era, was Mary Ann Evans. William Faulkner regarded Mark Twain as the father of the American literature. A quote from the novel: "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." A quote from the novel: "I think the devil doesn't exist, but man has created him. He has created him in his own image and likeness." Some conversation from the novel: "I always want to know the things one shouldn't do. So is to do them?" asked her aunt. "So is to choose," said Isabel. Chekhov was a practicing medical doctor. He once said, "Medicine is my lawful wife and literature is my mistress." Vladimir Nabokov argued that the good versus evil view of the novel was somewhat misleading, as Dr. Jekyll himself was not a morally good person by Victorian standards in some cases. Though now widely considered an important work of the 19th century, the novel received some criticism during its early time, as it challenged the sexual morals of the late Victorian England. A journey by steamer through the river Congo inspired Conrad to write this novella. In 1909, the incumbent US President Theodore Roosevelt wrote to Graham that he had read it, the book, and reread it, and had come to accept the characters as old friends. This monumental novel exemplifies the narration from involuntary memory. This graphic adaptation was published in 2013 after 100 years of the publication of the original book. The publication of this novel in Dubliners placed Joyce at the forefront of the modern authors. The novel's original title was The Saddest Story, but when World War I began, the publishers asked Ford for a new title. He jokingly suggested The Good Soldier. On waking up in a morning, the main character in this novella found himself transformed into a huge insect. The story narrates his struggles to adjust to this new condition. Some conversation from the novel. It is not necessary to accept everything as true. One must only accept it as necessary. A melancholy conclusion, said Kay. It turns lying into a universal principle. Wharton won the 1921 Pulitzer Prize for this novel. She was the first woman to win this prestigious award. This fiction, now generally regarded as one of the greatest novels ever, was banned in America and Britain during its early years for perceived obscenity. It is widely regarded as one of the most significant works of the 20th century in German language. The novel's depiction of friendship between colonizers and colonized contrasts with the contemporary mainstream European literature's more popular portrayal of India that it was a savage land deserved to be dominated. Though the novel is considered one of the greatest works in American literature, Fitzgerald died believing himself a total failure and to be forgotten. A quote from the novel: "Mrs. Dalloway is always giving parties to cover the silence." This dark and somewhat surrealistic fiction portrays uncaring and non-transparent bureaucratic controlling systems and their negative impacts. In this fiction, for the first time in a novel, Hemingway demonstrated his iceberg theory of writing with his sparse writing style for characterization and actions. A quote from the novel: "And all the lives we ever lived, and all the lives to be, are full of trees and changing leaves." A feminist classic, this novel is considered a lesbian or more recently a transgender fiction. This book is Hemingway's first bestseller and was called the premier American war novel from the debacle World War I. A quote from the novel The Sound and the Fury: "No battle is ever won," he said. "They are not even fought. The field only reveals to man his own folly and despair, and victory is an illusion of philosophers and fools." In writing the novel, Huxley took the inspiration from the utopian novels of H.G. Wells, especially A Modern Utopia and Man Like Gods. An important work of the 20th century literature, this book's original French edition was banned in the US for obscenity. The country's Supreme Court assessed its 1961 US edition and declared it non-obscene in 1964. A quote from the novel: "Surely there is something in madness, even the demoniac, which Satan flees, aghast at his own handiwork, and which God looks on in pity." This Pulitzer Award-winning fiction was the only published novel by Mitchell during her lifetime. Although the novel was initially poorly received, it has been regarded as one of the important works in African American literature and women's literature since the late 20th century. A quote from the novel: "And in the eyes of the people, there is the failure, and in the eyes of the hungry, there is a growing wrath. In the souls of the people, the grapes of wrath are filling and growing heavy for the vintage." Like the author's another book, Tropic of Cancer, the sequel, this one also was banned in the US until 1961. In 1941, Pulitzer Prize Board decided to award this novel in latter, but the ex-officio head of the board at that time, Nicholas Murray Butler, considered the book offensive and persuaded the board to cancel the decision. A quote from the novel: "I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world." The themes of the novel include nostalgia for the age of English aristocracy, Catholicism, and the non-secretive homosexuality of the Sebastian Flight Squadron at Oxford University. This novel employs rich symbolism and references and allusions to other writers and works. Orwell once pointed out that the novel was based chiefly on communism rooted in English-speaking countries, not derived from the communism in Soviet Union. Orwell wrote to Evan David in a letter that the novella was a satirical tale against Joseph Stalin. After many years of its original publication, this classic still sells 1 million each year today. The novel is about a friendship between a livestock pig named Wilbur and a barn spider. A quote from the novel: "I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me." This Pulitzer Award-winning novel was cited by the Nobel Prize Committee as a contributing factor in awarding the author the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954. A quote from the novel: "We did everything adults would do. What went wrong?" Now, generally considered one of the greatest 20th century novels, it has controversial subjects like a middle-aged professor's obsession for a 12-year girl and sexual relationship with her later as her stepfather. A quote from the novel: "There was nowhere to go but everywhere, so just keep on rolling under the stars." By this novel, Achebe broke from the predominant European author's view that portrayed Africans as savages in need of Western enlightenment. A quote from the novel: "They, mockingbirds, don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. That's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird." Heller, a bombardier during World War II, developed an anti-war and anti-government theme found in the book as a product of Korean War and the 1950s rather than World War II itself. Nabokov derived the title from Shakespeare's Timon of Athens. The moon is an errant thief, and her pale fire she snatches from the sun. The novel is an anti-colonial response to Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre, describing the background to Mr. Rochester's marriage from the point of view of his mad wife. A quote from the novel: "He really had been through death, but he had returned because he could not bear the solitude." The fiction has been praised almost unanimously for its moral clarity and considered one of the most enduring anti-war novels of all time. Starting from 1980s, this well-acclaimed book became a target of challenge due to its open discussion about sex and presence of anti-Christian material. Now a highly acclaimed novel, its manuscript had been rejected by 7 publishers before it was accepted by a one-man publisher who wrote to an associate, "I have taken on a novel about rabbits, one of them with extrasensory perception. Do you think I am mad?" One of the possible explanation for the title is rainbow-shaped trajectory path of a rocket under gravitational pull. Another could be some plot arcs. Despite its intricate structures, long sentences, and paragraphs spanning several pages, it was the most popular book in Spain in 1975. A quote from the novel: "It's a bad word, belong, especially when you put it with someone you love. You can't own a human being." Like Conrad, who in Heart of Darkness does not name the big river, Naipaul too does not name the river in his novel, nor the town at his band. Each chapter in this book has two parts, and the main character of the first part is the reader himself. The novella was based on a real-life murder of a bride's boyfriend by her two brothers to avenge the loss of her virginity. Set in a magic realism, the novel is a loose allegory of some events in India both before and after its independence in 1947. A quote from the novel: "A girl child ain't safe in a family of man, but I never thought I would have to fight in my own house." The novel initially generated lukewarm reception, but later it has acquired high praise. Now it is considered McCarthy's masterpiece. Some argue the book is a science fiction. Atwood, however, says she writes speculative fiction. A quote from the novel: "She would defend herself, saying that love, no matter what else it might be, was a natural talent. She would say, you are either born knowing how, or you never know." The novel is an example of academic satire, where the shortcomings of academia are ridiculed through irony or sarcasm. A quote from the novel: "Freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another." The novel contains folklore elements with myth and superstition, placing itself in magic realism genre. Thematically, the story revolves around the narrator character Stephen, a butler, relating his concern for dignity, interest in banters, loyalty to his employer and political party, and his love relationship. The title "Possession" refers to several themes in the novel, such as questioning the mutual ownership and independence between lovers and the sense of belonging for the collection of historical artifacts. A quote from the novel: "Every night I cut out my heart, but in the morning it was full again." A quote from the novel: "Beauty is rarely soft or consolatory. Quite the contrary. Genuine beauty is always quite alarming." A quote from the novel: "I don't think we did go blind. I think we are blind. Blind but seeing. Blind people who can see but do not see." Even before its publication, there was a hype for this heavily marketed encyclopedic literary fiction. The novel deals with waste and byproducts of the history people once buried or rather forgotten. But like radioactive product buried underground, their effects cannot be ignored. Thus, the title came to the author's mind. The novel is considered a detective story, an account of an unstable marriage, an excavation of the buried secrets of World War II, all in one book. Apart from the original Turkish novel itself, its French, Italian, and English translations also won prestigious literary awards. A quote from the novel: "If we are going to be kind, let it be out of simple generosity, not because we fear guilt or retribution." It is a literary novel about comics industry, which won the Pulitzer for Fiction in 2001. The novel portrays the Dominican dictator Trujillo's assassinations and its aftermath. It's, however, a fictional work. As Yosa himself once said, it's a novel, not a history book, so I took many liberties. Though the novel takes place entirely in Caddy's native country Australia, to attract more buyers, its American publisher Alfred Knopf touted it as a great American novel, only based on the fact that the author lived in the USA for many years. A quote from the novel: "It wasn't only wickedness and scheming that made people unhappy, it was confusion and misunderstanding. Above all, it was the failure to grasp the simple truth that other people are as real as you." A quote from the novel: "No one can explain exactly what happens within us when the doors behind which our childhood terrors lurk are flung open." Some reviewers find the anxiety and apprehension found in the novel's characters similar to those of Americans following the 9/11 event in New York, though it was published 10 days before the event. The novel has some autobiographical elements, though unlike its main character, the author is not an intersex. A quote from the novel: "As much as I live, I shall not imitate them, or hate myself for being different to them." This Pulitzer Award-winning historical fiction was polled the second best novel since 2000 by some panel of critics, writers, and editors in 2009. As this Chilean author passed away, the meaning of the title is still unknown. Only some speculations have been attempted. The novel has been suggested to fit into quasi-science fiction, coming of age, and even horror genre. Some reviewers held the opinion that the Booker Prize awarded to this novel was not a populist choice, but others defended its worthiness for the award well deserving for its lyrical stylistic prose. A quote from the novel: "War was always here. Before man was, war waited for him, the ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner." A quote from the novel: "You really want to know what being an X-Man feels like? Just be a smart, bookish boy of color in a contemporary US ghetto." These two Man Booker Prize winning books are the part of a historical fiction trilogy. The last book is yet to be published. A quote from the novel: "History is that certainty produced at the point where the imperfections of memory meet the inadequacies of documentation." Alice Munro is considered one of the greatest short story writers ever. The American writer Cynthia Ozick put it, "Ava Chekhov." Dunsany is regarded by some critics a key figure in fantasy genre. He published more than 90 books during his lifetime. The famous authors like Stephen King, Ramsey Campbell, and Neil Gaiman have cited Lovecraft as one of their primary influences. The novel is often compared with Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. It inspired both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. A quote from the novel: "Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not, or that you feel good this morning, or that it is a morning to be good on?" The series is a fantasy work without the need for magic or dark overlords. The renowned fantasy writer Michael Moorcock has written that the book is even better than Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and has significant influence on his own works. A quote from the novel: "Wandering to rule them all, wandering to find them, wandering to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie." Moorcock dedicated this novel to the memory of Marvin Peake, one of his literary heroes. Its atmosphere resembles that of Peake's Gormenghast series. Saverian, the main character and the narrator, is a Christ-like figure, as Genome himself outlines some allegorical comparisons between their lives. The story is set in a world where both magic, referred as thaumaturgy in the book, and some medieval-era technology coexist. A quote from the novel: "Gods die, and when they truly die, they are unknown and unremembered. Ideas are more difficult to kill than people, but they can be killed in the end." She wore a gown the color of storms, shadows, and rain, and a necklace of broken promises and regrets. Some conversation from the novel. I am frightened of nothing. Nothing? Nothing. Are you extremely frightened of nothing? Absolutely terrified of it. I have nothing in my pockets. Would you like to see it? No, I most definitely would not. Until now, about 150 well-acclaimed fictional works in the forms of novels and collection of short stories and dramas have been shown. Most of these works can be found in the existing top 50 or top 100 lists created by experts and readers of literary fictions. Selected from the collections, here followed my list of the top 50 fictional works of all time, arranged in chronological order of their original publications.